Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Today I am talking to Dan Englander. This is his second time back on the pod. He's a friend of the pod. And if you don't know who Dan is, the CEO and founder of Sales Schema, a fractional new business development team for marketing agencies and B2B service companies. He's also the host of the Digital Agency Growth podcast and the author of Relationship Sales at Scale. And he's on a mission to help agencies and B2B service companies go from reactive mode to owning repeatable new business processes. And in today's pod, we dive right into that, the different stages that Dan has seen after working with hundreds of agencies of growth and identifying what to do at each stage so that you can self-identify. But we have a little twist to it. Dan removes the need to attach yourself to a revenue number or a headcount as a measurement of success. So we dive into the nuances of what that all means and what you can do to grow your agency in a healthy and balanced style. Dan, welcome back.
Raul, thank you for having me.
It's cool. Like you do these things long enough, you start getting repeat guests and like you called it, friends of the pod. Welcome back for another pod.
Yeah, it's nice to have that, and it takes some time, but I definitely enjoy recurring guests sometimes more than just getting a who's who of new faces all the time. So appreciate
Because
you
you
having
can
me.
go deeper. It's like reading the same book and you find out something that you didn't understand or you were a different person, you go deeper into it, but it's also like different experiences and time changes that. But we were chatting before and I'm seeing some interesting things. I'm talking to the market, you're talking to the market, you're seeing what people are thinking about buying and their preferences. And the old adage of you need to get to this revenue number or you need to go to this growth goal or you need to hit this stage. I liked your perspective that new goals or new approaches to building an agency that can serve you as the owner or the person running it doesn't have to be, like in your words, pegged to revenue. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, and I'll start at the beginning, and I might trail off for a while. This is a post I just wrote, so this is all newly bubbling in my head. So if I butcher
Mhm.
this, apologize in advance. But let me back up. So a lot of the times we're told that we look at some case study where somebody's achieved this arbitrary revenue growth goal or expanded their headcount or achieved some award, and we chase that, and then we end up miserable because we find out that we're chasing somebody else's dream, right? And we
Mm.
know that's unhealthy. We're told that's unhealthy. Everybody knows that's the definition of shiny object syndrome and like just chasing growth, even though that's not really what you want. So we know that. But I think the thing that's underappreciated, and this ties into like mimetic desire and like Rene Girard and all these people and Luke Burgess, who's wrote a primer on Girard, is that you're not going to avoid comparing yourself to others, be they individuals or agencies or other companies, in the same way that you're not going to avoid the force of gravity. It's just there.
Mhm.
So that's the bad news. But the good news is there is a healthier way to do it, and you can be conscientious about the models you compare yourself to.
Mm.
So, what does that have to do with these stages of growth? Is that I think that now, as we get further and further into a more digital age, success and the health of a business and also achieving your goals is pegged much less so to things like revenue or headcount or other metrics that are very loud and very legible that people optimize for at the expense of everything else, right? So for to bring this down to earth, like we've worked with over 100 agencies, talked to thousands more over the years, and we found that there's these like stages of not really growth, but like business health and business maturity,
Mhm.
and each stage, the agency gets more empowered, regardless of whether their goal is to scale to 8 figures or simply have a better life or take 90-day sabbaticals or sell the organization in a few years. And that's the thing that I'm honing in on now is what stage are you at, regardless of your ultimate goal?
That's pretty interesting. So, I mean, it is a primer of quality. I mean, not just for the owner, but a quality of agency life versus the quantity or sustenance of what's actually happening. And this isn't to dismiss if you want to grow to a 15, 20, $30 million agency, like that's totally fine. But it's like it has to be your goal, it has to start from there because all the yeses that you say yes to will be substantially different, and the no's that you'll say no to will be very clear and like abundantly clear in front of you. Help me break down if we can talk about the stages. I've done a roadmap for from boutique agencies to what I call high profit agencies. Typically, they're doing 7 figures in profit with like 3 million in rev or something like that. So there's a sweet spot that I've seen with running agencies, helping people grow. And like there's a really fun spot. I kind of want to see how my like tiers adjust to what you've seen in your experience. What are the levels that you're seeing?
Yeah, I'll definitely get into that. But to frame it out a little bit and just give an example of how this is like becoming definitely unpegged to revenue and sometimes even not unpegged to profit. Profit's like really important and that matters a
Yeah.
lot. But for example, let's like we've worked with lots of eight-figure agencies over the years, and then they
Mhm.
seem like they're doing great and they're amazing. And then you lift up the hood, you talk to them on one calls, and they're like, yo, we're one heartbeat away from like bankruptcy and layoffs. Like if we lose
Yeah.
one gorilla client, and this one CMO who's our friend gets fired or leaves or just wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, like we're in real trouble. And they're in, a vulnerable spot. There's a lot of the times they can't move as fast. Like
Mhm.
it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And then on the other hand, there's seven and even six-figure agencies where the company can basically do whatever they want. They have a
Mm.
division of duties. The owners can work or go on vacation and they can work with exactly the clients they want to and so on. So that's how these things are becoming decoupled from just revenue and even
Mhm.
profit. Cause like, let's say you're a really profitable eight-figure agency and you've got 10 clients, you lose one client, that's 10% of your revenue. And that's a
Mhm.
huge chunk, right? So that's like, there's intangibles there. But to answer your question, the stages as we see them is like stage one is like the base of it. And that's glorified freelancer turf. That's what we call it, the glorified freelancer. And again, none of these are bad. You're totally welcome to stay at one of these stages and have a great life. It's just as long
If people are happy, yeah. If you're happy and if it fits your lifestyle.
exactly. Yeah. And as long as you just count the costs and just know what it means, right? So glorified freelancer, even if you have employees, this is an organization where most of the heavy lifting and there's the key person problem with the owner. They're doing sales and fulfillment. The downside is you're not really building an asset that can scale or be sold. There's upside to it as well. You're an artisan. Stage two, which probably accounts for like more than half of our clients in sales schema, even like seven and even eight-figure agencies, is what we call the meanderer. And this is an organization that has had success. They have gotten client results. They're generally profitable. Sometimes they've been around for years, but like still they haven't really nailed a repeatable business development process, which has a lot of cascading negative effects because the agency is still forced to take bad fit clients that are a mishmash. And
Mm.
that creates confusion, that creates team morale issues and all sorts of other things. People stay at that stage for a long time. Stage three is getting better. Stage three is where the agency had a lot more clarity. We call it the cruiser, basically. Like you can
Mm.
cruise the stage for a while. At least that's, I might change all these. We'll see. This is new,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm calling it right now. And this is an organization that has had traction, at least with one channel. They've gotten some, maybe it's inbound, maybe it's content or something like that. They have kind of a core focus, but there's still a lot of the new business has to come from the owner. And a big part of that is they haven't really nailed outreach yet. And that makes
Mm.
it hard to take control over like when, where, and how they develop relationships, which makes it harder to get out of the sales seat. And then the owners are still stuck there.
Yeah.
The last stage, the top of the pyramid, is basically what we're calling the unfettered, right? So this is an agency where the owners are pretty much out of sales and they're involved in the agency exactly when, where, and how they want to be. So this is like
Mm.
zone of genius stuff. They're doing whatever they want. They have an asset they can sell or step away from if that's what they want, or they can keep grinding and scaling some big level. And those are the stages as we've seen them. To give context, probably at the top of the pyramid represents about 10% or less of the clients we've ever worked with.
Yeah.
Level three, the cruiser, probably 20 to 30. And then meander, probably more than half. And then glorified freelancer, usually we can help out through like a books or a course or something. Mhm.
No, this is interesting because I see myself and clients in different tiers and we're like where they're at. The interesting point, and I know we're decoupling this from revenue and goals, and I think it's important because you can still be a cruiser and have a solid 5, 15 people team, just depending on where you're at and your goals are. So I think again, less of, hey, you have to hit this 8-figure number, or this is why you have to do it. But I think it's more about milestones to be met. And those milestones are pretty much tied to predictability and time freedom, is what I'm hearing. Really, predictability of sales development, business development, and having processes nailed down, because that's the number one thing. The other thing too that I've seen in cruisers, I mean, just from my experience with clients, is partnerships are the key thing. Partnerships are the way to create sustainability. Even looking at acquisitions of smaller agencies and buying there, or like education, or just building more content on the front end. I'm curious on your end, and I know this is where you specialize in. Really, a lot of this is dictated by solving the number one issue, which always gets sold online. I mean, if you open IG, I get all these ads of, hey, just click here, and in 6 months you have 100K months, and like, everyone's selling the same thing. Who started it? I don't know. It's like it's insane. But leads and sales and predictability. What is the chasm or the gap between these two? Like from the glorified freelancer to the what's the second the meander? Yeah, that starts with an M.
To think
Gotta
about it
get it right.
too, it's new for me as well because I just came up with this concept.
Oh, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And some of the things that I've outlined do tee this up. I look at product, team satisfaction, owner stress, and is it an asset? And you have to do a lot of deep soul searching of knowing if you're going to be a glorified freelancer, what does that mean for you in your future? No asset creation. Maybe you invest in new other assets, or if you're actually going to create an asset, knowing that's the game you're coming into and knowing that it has to be played differently. But let's talk about the chasm and the breaks. Have you taken time to review like what needs to happen to be true to move in from stage one to stage two, from the meanderer to the cruiser? I think that's the biggest piece from the cruiser to the unfettered. What are some of the chasms or jumps or things that need to be true for us to achieve to that stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So starting from glorified freelancer and then going to meanderer, I think the biggest thing is like just clarity, although clarity is something that constantly gets built on throughout all the stages, and self-understanding and resolve, right? So basically you have to have the fortitude to be like, okay, I'm no longer just an artisan. Like I'm willing to be a leader. I'm willing to be a business owner and
Mhm.
step into all the different skill acquisition sets and all the different, all the time that goes into that. Right. So you have to be ready to make that jump and to graduate from just being like, hey, I'm really good at working in Canva or whatever to running a company. Right. And
Mhm.
take some responsibility for that. So that's probably the first big leap. And then I think that it might sound discouraging because you're like, I'm going from being a freelancer to meandering, but being a meanderer isn't horrible. It just is. I think it's just a better way of setting expectations for what's going to happen with your business. Is you're not going to nail it right away. Like even
Mhm.
companies that do really well and make enough money to support families still have to go through that process to actually to build like an asset that's scalable and can be sold and can achieve the next level. So I think going from 2 to 3 is amping up that clarity, is getting a lot more serious about sales and going
Mhm.
from a situation where like you're doing sales as a hobby to one where you're becoming a sales driven organization, which might
Yeah.
mean expanding the team or making the team more sophisticated. And then I think going from 3 to 4 is really, or from cruiser to unfettered is really just about intensifying that process and just like having, even an even stronger division of duties, honing in even more, on the ICP that you're most positioned to help, probably saying no more often.
Mhm.
And then and slowly adding another channel. In our case, we find outbound to be like a really important part of the table, like a leg of
Oh
the whole
yeah.
table, but it could be other things too. Yeah.
Yeah, the top three outbound content and paid ads to amplify the content and
Yeah.
retarget are the big three. I also would say like on the I believe this, I see this, and I can validate this from my experience too. Even on the unfettered, the bigger piece too is the leadership. It's leadership, business services, backend structure, SOPs, just from like living it and breathing it. The stuff that happens there is slower, it's bigger, it's more intentional, but it also feels like, hey, you're not in startup mode anymore where you got to work 1 weeks of time in 3 days. Like it's
Yeah.
these things take time. It's a longer tail approach. And I think it also gives us a good sobering approach. Hey, if you're going to build something, it's not going to happen. And I mean, you might listen to this, great, you can do this, but typically it takes time. It's not going to be like a 3 month, 6 month thing. You're looking at investing years to make this grow. And the cool part is that it's possible. Let's double click on becoming a sales driven organization. So I want to put a definition. What is that? What are some of the behaviors that constitute that? Because I have a definition for it. I want to know what you mean by that. So let's just start with
Yeah.
what it is and then maybe identifying behaviors that identify as sales driven.
Yeah, it's a great question. As usual, it's like often a lot easier to define what it's not than to define like all the ways in which somebody can be successful. And I think
Yeah.
what it's not, and what we tend to see that's really common is like sales as a hobby is like something that you do when you need to do it.
Like the cyclical sales, right? Not like a daily habit.
Right. So not thinking of it as a habit, I think is a big one. But as far as like it becoming like a sales driven organization, I think a lot of that involves bringing the wins that are happening on the fulfillment side into your marketing and like into everything else you're doing and
Mm.
thinking about how everything can drive towards selling, right? And towards that. And what that means tactically is going to depend on your market and your situation, but that might mean taking a win that's going on and making it into a post or engaging with people that are interacting with that post, or could mean thinking more about if you're an owner and you're in that sales seat, like how can you treat sales with the same sort of gravitas that you're treating your fulfillment process, right? So if you
Mm.
whatever you do, you probably have a division of duties in that process where it's okay, well, I can't go hire the six-figure salesperson yet. That doesn't mean you can't have a similar division of duties in the way that you're conducting sales, even if it's just you or a small team running it right now. So if you're an owner and you're stuck in the sales seat, how can you divide up your time to be more effective? So, like from an outreach perspective, that often means having different time buckets for strategy, which is like writing copy, building, figuring out who you're contacting, versus the sort of grunt work, but that's still important of research, versus like actually getting on calls with people and moving the process forward, so that you're not
Mhm.
task switching. So, I think it's really just treating sales as a martial art and as something that is important as opposed to a necessary evil.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think even again, a lot of the people that listen to this are in different stages, but I think having sales as a habit it can be even from a glorified. You don't have to wait to your Miranda, like in less stage two to go to cruising to have sales as a habit. I think you can start this now as a glorified
Totally.
freelancer because it's all 60%, 70% is selling, and then the rest is fulfillment.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry to cut you off, man, but just to add to that, I think like a big part of being in that meander stage that so many organizations are in is getting clarity to figure out like what you're going to double down on. And I think sometimes sales is seen in this sort of myopic way where it's I'm only here to close deals and bring up the number. But that's probably 70, 80%, but there's a solid 20% that's like learning and understanding your
mm,
market. Like you can go read all the articles you want. You can go ask people, would you buy this thing that I'm thinking of doing? It's a completely different conversation compared to, hey, I'm selling this. Do you want to buy it? And then asking people why they did or didn't buy, right? That's going to tell you more than like absolutely anything else you can do. So it has to be there, even if it's not entirely just for making the number go up, basically.
no, that makes a complete sense. It's business development versus, hey, I'm just here to close deals. It's more like I'm here to build relationships that over time will yield into deals. And sometimes you don't know that doing these activities because you're hoping that it does. I mean, that's a conversation you and I had before this is I'm hoping that the what we're doing here is going to yield results, but right now you're just trusting the process. Two of the things that I usually tell clients, and obviously this is an overly simplification, but like just boiling it down that the two major habits are writing and talking to people. Like writing, which becomes content, videos, courses, or whatever your thought leadership is based on your experience that you share and people get to know you. And then from there, talking to people is outreach, engagement, inbound, and just having conversations with people that lead to other conversations. So that habit, it is a snowball from my experience that it seems like it's nothing, but then it boils to something big and now you have something that's pretty massive that can be opportunities anywhere you go. Do you see it the same or is there like gaps? Is that too overly simplified or
No, I think that's really good. And I think it's like I wish that expectation was set more for people that are like going out past referrals for the first time and trying to build that more scalable channel, whether it's an inbound or an outbound one, which is that especially if we're talking about B2B services and that kind of thing, like the sales cycles are long, honing in on your offer is going to take time.
Mhm.
So I think the snowball effect is like it's not just that it's a healthier way to put it, it's a more accurate way to put it, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what we see for our clients from running outreach campaigns. Is like the money is not made on the initial outreach. It's made from like the third, fourth, fifth conversation that's being had. So yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And to make it less intimidating, it doesn't mean being everywhere, having a million different channels you're working on. It
Yeah,
means
no, just start
like a
one.
couple. Yeah.
Start with one or two, master those. And those are typically either if you're on B2B, it's this is not a recommendation. It's typically always LinkedIn and then some sort of email or DM or private chat channel, like where you're engaging people or you're teaching on other platforms. Tell me more about, I mean, so I've been selling from LinkedIn last 5 years, 6 years, and whatever. It's great. It's awesome. There's a lot of different channels that are, I think, being abused now with AI. Obviously, LinkedIn is one of them. We got a ton of messaging that's fake or spam or like drip sequences. That's been a thing. But it's also more prevalent now with the emails. Like one of the stats that I saw from someone trying to sell me something was like, oh, we'll send 10,000 emails a day. But then from there, you'll get like 10 deals in a month. I'm like, well, how many emails do we have to take to,
Yeah.
to do that? That's insane. And like you'd hire someone, they set up 100 domains for you on Outlook. That's great. I think the channel works, and I think if you're doing it intentionally. But what are you seeing in terms of personalization? outreach, leveraging AI the proper way, and building real relationship. Because there is a golden needle in that haystack of leveraging
Yep.
those channels in the appropriate way, even AI, but still being cool about it.
Yeah, triggered in so many levels, not by you, but by the topics at hand.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think this will be live by the time our interview goes live, but I actually wrote an article about AI because I get asked that all the time. How are you using AI B2B sales outreach? And the short answer is not much. And I think that we're like getting forced into the situation where everybody feels like they have to cheerlead for AI when like it really isn't producing a lot of, it's really not a game changer yet. And and this is not an anti AI thing. It's not to say that it can't be or won't be, but on the B2B sales front, it's like the cost of getting this stuff wrong is really big. There, like you described, there is this growing skepticism and walls that are going up in response to fake personalization. Most people's total addressable markets, especially in B2B, aren't that big. So it's the cost of the efficiencies you're getting from contacting thousands of people are not that massive. Cost of getting it wrong is worse because you can very easily end up in the spam box and have to restart all over, not to mention you're probably annoying people, pissing them off. And then let's say I'm wrong about all that and you do get AI to work for your outreach efforts and you do get a bunch of meetings from it. The salesperson's still going to have to talk to all these people and be accountable for what was said by the AI, right?
Mhm.
And there's this kind of human bottleneck issue, even if you get it all to work, which I think even if you're having success now, there's going to be diminishing returns as more and more people start turning on the robots. So the effect of all this is there some utility? Yes, probably like in terms of like data and making a better list, but it's just not really massive. And we keep getting pushed into the saying like, oh, AI is so great. And it's, yeah, maybe it's like Excel. Our accountants right now, it's early March and we're recording this are like working 80-hour weeks because it's tax time. Excel didn't change their lives that much. I mean,
Mhm.
it didn't like drastically change their lives. It was a tool that's helpful. And I'm not even sure if it's that good yet. I'm not dismissing it. There could be some game changer that happens, but that's what we're seeing. And I might have lost the second part of your question, but that's my AI
No,
speak.
that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. And even from my experience, I think AI is helpful for me on researching and then creating better lists. Like I mean, I'm not plugging in, I'm not a sponsor, but the tool Clay has been very useful to enrich data, help me like do some things with. But that's more automation than it is AI. It's not really true AI at that point. But I think I want to double click on one thing you said, then ask the second part of the question is the total addressable market. We're not trying to hit hundreds of thousands of people. Like, if anything, most agencies want to take on, if you're listening to this, probably 4 or 5 clients a month, if at most 10. I mean, that sounds crazy low or small expectations, but some of my best like friends who are growing 8-figure agencies or trying to grow beyond that, they don't want to take on 20 clients a month. They want quality 5, maybe 8 clients at most. So if you think about that and you work backwards, what's your close rate? How many people need to talk to you? How many people need your service? What's the relationship like? You don't need hundreds of people. You need at max maybe 300 people to talk to a month. People to
Yeah.
talk to, not just like offers made. Because out of those, some people would have offers out of those. Some people would get on a call out of those. Some people will buy. So it's like the snowball effect again, which leads to the second part of the question is like, what do you see? You don't have to dive into the exact details, like here's what to connect this webhook and things like that. But how would you approach the question of proper outreach using the same channels that everyone else is spamming on? LinkedIn,
Yeah.
email.
It's a great question. So first to think about channel a little bit, like email is still great because it's still where we go to make plans and do business. It's anti-fragile, been around forever. It scales. You can be compliant with it versus if you automate LinkedIn, you're taking some risk because they could slap you down or whatever. So that's why we like email. But to answer your question, I think like the thing we're up against is not differentiation. I talk a lot about this. I probably covered it before, but it's not really like bells and whistles and features and benefits at top of the funnel. For agency B2B services, especially, it's really lack of trust. Like we're in a real trust drought. And this is probably like on a macro level, but especially
Mhm.
for something like an agency service where people likely been burned before, or they're just getting pitched all day for it or whatever. So given that, and given that your total addressable market is small, the way that we found outreach to work really well is sending somebody the sort of message that they would get if you actually know them or met them or you're in their world, right? So, what this means tactically, there's not one way to do it, is we're often looking for commonalities. We're looking for prospects for our clients that have a strong something in common personally or on a business level that is compelling. and that is going to agree to make somebody de-risk a call. So
Mhm.
sometimes that could, I mean, honestly, like one really tried and true way is like looking at the geographies and looking at who's in your physical backyard, who you could actually meet, who's going to a conference. That's a great starting place. Getting more sophisticated, we're looking at people that might have used to work for a former client. And it's not just arbitrary. It's one of these things that's like if somebody used to work for your best former client and they were there for years, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to match your strategic vision and who's a
Mhm.
fit for your organization. So thinking about things in terms of your circles of influence and then getting to that sort of Goldilocks zone, we call it, between personalization and scale, right? So for every situation is different, but for most people, we're sending out no more than a few hundred pieces of outreach per week.
Per week,
It's
that's key.
so yeah, and I've used the word scale a lot, but as time goes on, I'm moving more towards thinking of this in terms of leverage, right? Because it's not like
Yes.
when it's scale, but I think it's like leveraged outreach is the better way to think about it. So that like 99% of the people that get it are like, this is just for me, and you're in the
Mhm.
right place. Yeah.
I think that's key, and that's actually really helpful. I mean, I'm not downing other methods, but yeah, the big idea is, you got to send 5, 10,000 emails a day, and that's what I'm hearing in some channels. I think that's ridiculous. Here, it's 100, maybe 100 a week, but it's personalized, it has relevancy, and you're anchoring based on affinity or something that makes sense. It's business or personal relevance. Plus, it feels like it was just meant for them, which is pretty stellar. Dan,
Yeah.
what's exciting you now as we're heading into 24, business, markets, team, the work that you're doing? What's exciting you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about this before we threw on the recorder, but the thing that's exciting me is just allowing myself to work on writing more and content and letting myself enjoy that as a win in and of itself, even if nobody clicks on it. And hopefully they do, but worst case scenario, if they don't, it was still fun to develop ideas in that way. So just giving myself permission to do that is exciting. And
Mhm.
also we're continuing to like fine tune our training program for agencies and B2B service companies that are looking to make targeted email outreach a leg of the table over the next
Mhm.
90 days or so. That's fun. Yeah. And then other than that, dealing with our first newborn, just keeping me busy.
That's where life is exciting. Well, Dan, I appreciate you being on, for everyone being on today here. Where's the best place for them to go just to catch up on what you're up to and reach out to you?
Yeah, saleschema.com. That's SALESCHEMA, two S's in the middle. And we have free trainings there and everything like that. So people can learn a lot there.
Cool. I'll put that link in the show notes. Dan, thanks again, man.
Raul, always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/free growth resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/free growth resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.